My fiancé, Adam, has 4 kids from his former partners, twin daughters, preschoolers, another daughter, pretween, and a son, preschooler. I have a daughter, kindergartner. He would treat all the kids the same till the wedding planning came. He picked his son as the ring bearer and his 3 daughters as flower girls but had no role for my daughter. I asked if we could add her to be a flower girl just like her stepsisters, but he refused without explaining. He just kept it short, saying no. My daughter heard the girls talking about it and said she wanted to be the flower girl as well, and I brought it up with Adam again. He told me 3 was enough to be flower girls and that there was no spot left for my daughter. I said we could make them 4 and add my daughter. Why not? He said it wouldn't work for some reason. I insisted, and he suddenly snapped and told me it was not a huge deal for me to be so worked up like this. I said my daughter wishes to be among the flower girls and wear and do what they do, and his daughters aren't somehow superior to mine. He gave me a nasty stare and said, "So this is what it's all about," then told me I was being ridiculous and quite toxic with this my child your child mentality. He insisted that he treats all the kids the same and that he can't believe I'd questioned that over some nonsensical issue as the flower girl. We had a full-blown argument, and he said I was acting immaturely by insisting on making this a big deal and choosing it as a hill to die on. Am I the idiot for choosing this hill to die on, or am I being unreasonable? For those who are confused about the age of his twin daughters and son, he got both of his exes pregnant at the same time, take or give a few months. He divorced his first ex, then went on to marry the second ex, then later divorced her. Let me get this straight. In the span of 4 to 5 years, this man has gotten his first wife pregnant, cheated on his first wife, possibly while she was pregnant, got the mistress pregnant, divorced the first wife, married the mistress, divorced the mistress, dated and proposed to you successfully. Busy guy. Okay, prepare to be cheated on. He has a pattern. Now he's being mean to your daughter for an unspecified reason. Not the idiot. Die on this hill and reevaluate if he's worth marrying. Seriously, just that small bit of history she shared about him would make me run and is a giant red flag. She definitely shouldn't marry this man. He got 2 women pregnant simultaneously, and this is the dude you want to marry? Marry some self-esteem and save your daughter the therapy. Grab your daughter and run. Do not marry this man. If this is how he treats your daughter now, how will he treat her after the wedding? There are 4 little girls. If 4 is too many, then there should only be 2, one of his and one of yours. Why should his 3 get to be a part of the wedding, but your only daughter is not? Why do you not have any say in your wedding? Will you have any say in any decisions after the wedding? Yeah, he's showing you who he is, and your daughter will always come second to his kids. And in what world does he get to make all the wedding decisions anyway? Please, for your and your daughter's sake, break this off. How is this not enough for you to blow off the engagement? What would you say if your daughter, as an adult, brought someone like him home as a partner? Hey mom, this is Greg. He got someone pregnant while he was with his pregnant wife. Then he divorced his wife, married his mistress, then divorced her too. But I want to marry him. Geez, it makes you wonder why his other baby mamas left. This is an absolute example of gaslighting, and he does it knowingly and deliberately. You haven't said how long you 2 have been together, but given his previous relationships and timelines, it can't be more than a couple of years. The honeymoon phase of your relationship can't be far from over. And now he's showing you who he truly is. He hasn't learned anything from his 2 failed marriages, and doesn't value you or your child. Don't make the biggest mistake of your life. Walk away now. Recently, I, female 26, have won quite a lot of money in the lottery. It's not the main prize, it was one of the top 3 though, but it's a life-changing amount in my country. I grew up poor, very poor, and while I worked my way up, my closest family still struggles. I help, but I can't fix everything. Well, I couldn't before. My winnings were recently deposited into my bank account, completely separate from my normal one. I'm not touching that money until I have my meeting with the financial advisors that I hired. I plan to use a small amount of money to enjoy and use part to improve my family's life, e.g. buy them flats that they can later on afford to upkeep, but in a safer place and of better quality. Then invest the vast majority in a different venture to ensure revenue for years to come, so that I can live comfortably and help my family. The only people that know are my closest family and my boyfriend, Andy, 30. We've been together for 7 months, but we don't live together. Andy has different plans. He came up with a list of items he needs, and has been pressuring me to get them before I even speak to my advisors. Basically, he wants a new car, stereotypically. He wants something like a Tesla, which he doesn't need. He wants us to move in together, and for me to buy a house with a pool. He's now started talking about kids, blah, blah, even though he knows that I'm child-free. I've been refusing every single request, telling him that necessities come first, and that money should be under lock and key until I speak with my financial advisors. Naturally, he's not very happy. He's been calling me a Scrooge, telling me I don't love him anymore, calling me a cheapskate. Worst of all, he now told every one of our friends about this, and they've started pressuring me as well, asking me to fund nights out, etc., and they've been very cruel when I refuse, idiot being almost a compliment. I'm devastated. Am I really an idiot in this situation? Am I the idiot for not wanting to spend frivolously? Not the idiot. Unfortunately, your boyfriend now sees you as an ATM, not a girlfriend. It's not you. It's a sudden influx of money that shows people's true colors. He and your friends will not leave you alone. They will suck you dry of the money and then dump you. I would dump him and block them, then move ASAP. You need new friends. Oh, and you've only been together 7 months? Just 7 months, and he just makes demands? Daddy also spread the news of your win. He behaves as if it's his money. Well, I bet he thinks it is his money. It would be best if you ended it. He just sees the money, and he doesn't care about you anymore. Keep the money safe and unload the boyfriend. He'll only get worse. Han, you do not deserve this. He's cunning and selfish. When you would not comply, he told your friends, something you didn't want. His tactics will increase and expand if you don't set a boundary or cut him off. You deserve someone who respects your wishes and is a supportive partner. Congrats. Winnings usually amplify the worst in people's character. Stay true to yourself or you'll regret it. Just my 2-cent advice. Since you sound like a generous person, if I was in your shoes, I'd start figuring out who's sincerely asking for help, and who's asking for what they want and will always want more. I also wouldn't buy my family houses, because they might want more and more, and you'll only get scorned from them for not doing more, even if you give in to them until you're bankrupt. Good luck, because life is gonna change. I, 29 male, had a kid, my daughter, with my ex-wife, 32, 10 years ago. And there's no real way to sugarcoat this. But as soon as she was born, I left, and I never ended up seeing her in the hospital as a baby. I was never really present in her life at any point, but I ended up getting a divorce 11 months later, with her getting full custody, of course. I married young, was really stupid, and thought I'd end up being a good dad, despite having no skills. But I got scared that I'd turn out like my dad and chickened out. Not really an excuse, but an explanation, I guess. I paid child support for the first 3 years, but stopped afterward. I've been speaking with the girl's mother about reconnecting with her, but she thinks I should stay out of their lives. But I think making amends is always possible, so I'm not sure. I want to make things right, but I will respect their decision. I've seen her a few times, but her mother's always introduced me as a friend. She says she will tell him when she's ready. I've been dating a girl, 28, for about 10 months, and I really like her. I think I could see a life for us. And I know that sounds weird, but she's also said the same. I also spoke to my daughter's mother about meeting this girl, but she says absolutely not, and that's a bad idea. But if I want to reintroduce her into my life, isn't it fair that she gets to see my life too? Am I the idiot for this? Her mother says it's a terrible idea, so it's making me think that I am, but I just genuinely cannot see why. Obviously, I care for this girl, and I will care for her life too, but a relationship has to be two-sided. I don't think it's out of the question to show her my life too. You are the idiot. You're not her father. You are a stranger to your daughter. You paid support for 3 years, which means for 7 years, the mother's been alone, even financially. You don't get to walk back in because you have a girlfriend you think you might be with forever. This child isn't a relationship device. She's a human whose life and feelings matter more than you and your selfish desire to make amends. Try therapy to deal with your daddy issues before marriage and having children with this new woman. Why did you stop paying child support? Why haven't you started paying again? Sounds like OP owes 7 years worth of child support before he gets any say. After that, it's still going to be a long prove it that he's serious about being in his kid's life. The obvious conclusion is that his only motivation here is to con this new girl into thinking he's a halfway decent person, or at least not someone who will do to her and her potential child what he did to his ex and hers. The fact that he's clearly only interested in the child as a human prop to deceive his girlfriend and doesn't register the emotional harm that would do to the child pretty solidly indicates that he would likely do it again. Precisely, he knows she'll eventually find out he has a kid and knows that once she realizes that he ran out on the woman and child as soon as the birth happened and even stopped making payments 3 years in, she'll know what a selfish jerk he is. Your daughter isn't some trophy to show off. I 30 female have a set of triplets. Their father's supposed to get them every other weekend, but he rarely gets them. Maybe once every few months if he has a girlfriend he's trying to impress. So, my daughters are mixed. I'm very particular about how they look most of the time. If we go out in public, I make sure they look good, I make sure their hair is done, and they have very nice dresses. 99% of the time if someone sees my girls, they look magazine-worthy. However, they are toddlers and you just don't put on a pretty dress on them when they go to the park to play. I had taken them to get their pictures made for Christmas and after we went to the park because they deserved a reward for being so good. So, I changed them into some really warm rompers and coats. They also had hats and gloves. They weren't nasty or anything, but playing in dresses in the winter is just a no. They needed warm play clothes. Max called and asked what we were doing and I told him we were headed to the park. He wanted to see the girls so I told him to meet us at the park. I assumed he would be alone and I kind of assumed he wouldn't show up at all because it was very out of character for him. He showed up with a woman and a child. He immediately got angry with me because the girls weren't wearing pretty clothes. They were wearing winter play clothes. He also complained that one of the girls' hair looked a little messy. She's a toddler and messes with her hair, so of course it's messy. Also, she was wearing a winter hat, so you could barely see her hair anyway. I told him no, I wasn't going to put them back in their dresses and I wasn't going to keep fixing her hair just for her to take it down again. It's stressful for her and me. She was happily playing and didn't care at all. Anyway, he was very angry and I'm not sure if I was being the idiot or not. The woman he came with apologized to me for his behavior and I told her not to worry about it. Added to add, he's always been particular about outward appearances. He's always clean-shaven and meticulous about his hair and clothing. Nothing can be even slightly dirty or messy. So, I wasn't that surprised he immediately was upset about their appearances. Not the idiot. He doesn't help you with the triplets, but then shows up out of the blue just to criticize your parenting. I'd remind him that they have 2 parents and he's welcome to be involved with dressing them and doing their hair anytime he likes. I hope this idiot is paying child support. He villainizes you for taking care of your child. Yes, of course it's a good idea to risk my children getting hypothermia to impress a man who doesn't care about them. Whoever that man is, he's a wretch and a leech. He only wishes to impress based on living breathing beings with feelings that care and cherish. He uses living children to show and tell for his new flame every other week, which is gross. But ultimately, he fails when he can't keep up the perfect parent facade in front of his newest prey, a mother who sees right through it. And he was being so rude that a woman he brought along, possibly his girlfriend, who you'd never met before, felt compelled to apologize to you, his ex, for his behavior. Wow! How many more barrels can he scrape the bottom of? Then tell him he can dress them how he likes the next time he bothers to pick them up for his appointed weekend. My wife lost her mother to cancer 2 years ago. It was horrible and it took a toll on everyone, but obviously my wife more than anything. They were very close, pretty much best friends. We knew it was coming and the illness took over our lives, which is to be expected. I also knew my wife would struggle when she finally did pass, so I tried to convince her to go to therapy, but she refused. We have 2 older children, a young teen and a young child, and this year she gave birth to our youngest. This is the only grandchild my mother-in-law never got to meet. The whole pregnancy was very bittersweet and my wife kept saying, "I wish Mom was here. I wish Mom could meet him," etc. Again, to be expected. But the issue has come up that even before our son was born, every event went back to her mom. At first I understood, but it's become like we have this cloud hanging over us, preventing us from fully enjoying happy moments. I've tried talking to my wife about it gently, but she gets super defensive and refuses to even talk about therapy. Our oldest became a teen over the weekend. She had spoken to her mom privately and said she'd like for there to be no talk of her grandmother. She wanted a happy celebration and to not get sad that her grandmother wasn't there. My wife agreed. We went out to dinner and everything was fine. Towards the end, we had cake. My wife said, "It's just so sad that grandma can't be here. She'd be so proud of who eldest has turned out to be. I wish she could be here." Our eldest got mad. She blew out her candles, but didn't speak for the rest of the dinner. When we got home, I spoke to my wife privately and said what she did wasn't fair. I said she could have excused herself if she was that emotional, but she honestly didn't seem to be. I told her that this couldn't continue to happen. She told me that wasn't fair. I said what isn't fair is this rain cloud she forces over us. She's been off ever since and won't really talk to me or our eldest. She's saying that we are insensitive. Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. Your wife needs grief counseling. She's the idiot. Your child just had her entrance into being a teenager made about death by her mother. It's not about her grandma. It's not about your wife. It's about your kid, and she was denied that. So, your wife is being insensitive, not you or your child. Yeah, the wife's grief is very understandable, but it seems like she's tainting the memory of grandma for her daughter and for the rest of the family. It's enough of a constant situation that your daughter, who's only a young teen, literally asked her in advance not to do this one time for her own birthday celebration, and your wife wouldn't do it. It's obviously a problem. And just to point out, even if she refuses to get therapy, that doesn't mean the rest of you can't. You may have to learn coping strategies or ways to redirect. I don't get this take. Why should the rest of the family, who by all accounts seem to be doing fine, be the ones who have to put all the effort in to tiptoe around mom, who refuses to get help for her parent issues? It's been 2 years. 2 years of OP trying to tell her to get help, and of the kids hearing about their dead grandma on every special occasion. The person who needs help is the person creating the problem. Why should they have to figure out how to redirect their mom's behavior? They're kids, not trained. Everything between me and my wife, 31 female, seemed perfect on the outside. We have been together since high school. It was like something out of a romantic comedy. She was the nerdy girl who spent her lunch periods in the library and I was the football player. Even though historically we would have never spent time together, she and I ended up falling for each other. Right after college, we ended up getting married so we could move forward and start our lives together. We bought our first house very young, we both scored very nice jobs, and we started planning to have kids. Fast forward 3 years and we have one son and another baby on the way. In high school, my wife had a friend who had always rubbed me the wrong way. It was so obvious that he had a thing for her, but she constantly insisted that he was just nice. I tried to explain to her that it made me uncomfortable when she spent a lot of time with him because it was clear to me that he liked her and didn't care that she and I were happily married. Whenever I would bring it up, it would always cause an argument, so eventually I gave up. They talked on the phone all the time, they would always be texting each other and sending memes, and they had a ton of little inside jokes that I always felt like I was on the outside of. He didn't attend the same college as us, but they reconnected after graduation when we all moved back to our hometown. As it turned out, he was studying in the same field as her, so they were able to land a job at the same company. My wife didn't have a ton of friends in high school, so when she made a lot of friends at her new job she was very excited. She was buddy-buddy with a lot of the girls in the office and they would go to brunches, theater, and they would even have sleepovers on occasion. I was really happy for her because I knew she was looking for a group like that for so long, and part of me thought she would be spending less time with her male best friend. Last winter I started to notice the difference in how she interacted with him. She didn't talk to him as often, or at least I didn't see them talking as much. He stopped coming over to the house and I only saw him on occasion when I would visit the office. I was hopeful that she had outgrown him and they were finally parting ways. One day my wife came to me and told me that a bunch of the girls from the office were planning a girls' trip for the weekend. She told me it would be harmless fun, just drinking some wine and talking while they relaxed with their face masks. She left Friday evening and I stayed at home with the kids. I genuinely hadn't thought anything was wrong. Saturday evening rolls around and I'm in bed searching through Netflix looking for something to watch when my phone rings. It was a phone call for her male best friend. Right away I thought it was strange because he and I had never really been close, so him calling me was bizarre. I answered the phone and waited for him to say something, but he never did. I was about to hang up the phone when I heard a part of the conversation they were having. He was telling my wife how much he loved her. My wife was on the other line as well. Wherever she had gone for the weekend he had gone as well. I absolutely could not put down the phone while I listened. She told him that she regretted what they had done a few weeks ago and that last night was a mistake. She had gone there to have a conversation with him and end everything. It was then that I realized there never was a girls' trip. They continued their conversation until I could hear them kissing on the other line, then I finally hung up. I couldn't believe what I just heard. I felt sick to my stomach and I wanted to scream, but I couldn't do anything to upset my children. At first I thought it was such an odd time to be but dialed by him. The more I thought about it, people only but dial their recent contacts, so it didn't make sense for him to have accidentally called me. He did it on purpose. He called me while he had that conversation, hoping I would overhear it. About an hour passed, then I got the text messages. They were all from him. They were screenshots of conversations, pictures they had sent each other, and even a clip from a video that he had taken at the lake house they were staying in. I was absolutely shocked. It was the last thing I wanted to see, but I was glad he sent it. I didn't say anything back. He probably thought that he had won this imaginary fight that he and I have been having for the past 10 years, but I would find a way to make them both pay. I sat on the information, stewing in all of the ideas that I had to get revenge on them both. I knew that I wanted to get them fired, but that didn't seem like punishment enough. My wife came back Sunday night and couldn't even meet my eyes. She felt guilty for what she did, as she should have. By the end of the week she would only feel worse. I pretended like nothing happened, not wanting to stir the pot and upset our children any more than they would be after everything. Their well-being was my priority, which apparently she didn't care too much about. On Wednesday I was able to get a meeting with her boss. Her company had a strict no dating within the workplace rule, so I knew at the very least they would both be reprimanded for that. The real kicker in all of it was that one of the pictures my wife's friend sent me was of them together in the break room. I had attended many company Christmas parties in the past, so I recognized it well. Her boss was horrified when she saw the images of them together. No doubt she was thinking about how she drank her coffee at the table they screwed on. Now I knew my wife and I knew her well. I was certain she had no clue her friend sent me any of the information that he did. When she found out what he did, she would want nothing to do with him. His little power play cost him any chance he had of being with her after our separation. As soon as I stepped out of the office, I watched her boss storm over to her friend and practically drag him into the office. I went right over to my wife's desk and I dropped an envelope with all of the printed documents I had been sent alongside divorce papers. She had one of those open offices that didn't like to use cubicles or box their workers, and so everybody got a good view when I served her the papers. I told her that I wanted a divorce. Then, with my voice raised higher than it normally would be, I told her I knew everything about her affair with her friend. I watched the women around her raise their eyebrows and hurriedly look away as if they couldn't hear anything. My wife's face was as red as a tomato. She was so embarrassed. I walked out of the office knowing that she was likely about to get fired for what happened in the break room. I took the kids to my brother's house and we stayed with him for a few weeks while I looked for another apartment. She and I are officially divorced, but we're still going through custody hearings for the children. We have agreed on joint custody, but the biggest issue is figuring out the holiday schedule. She and her friend were both fired, and from what I understand she has completely cut him off. She moved back in with her mom and I ended up selling the house that I got to keep. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Her friend's intentions were always clear to you from the start, and it's such a shame that she wouldn't listen to you. Setting up clear boundaries between the two of them could have prevented the fallout of your marriage, but it seems like she might have had lingering feelings for him too. The worst part of all of this is that she didn't even have the courage to tell you about the affair. He only called to hurt you. You're right that it does seem like some sick power play on his end. I really hope you were able to move on from this and find someone else more worth the time and effort. Now let's move on to our next story. I, 26 male, met my ex, 25 female, in college, but we didn't date right away. We ended up running into each other after graduation and hooking up. She and I had been running in the same circles, but we weren't close by any means in college. After running into her, I did admit that I had a bit of a crush on her at some point, and she told me that she felt the same way. Things were good with us for a while. We had been together for 3 years when I popped the question and asked her to be my wife. She was beyond excited and told me that she wanted nothing more than to be my wife. We hadn't been living together at the time. She was on a lease with a roommate and she didn't want to abandon her. After our engagement, she slowly started moving things over so she could officially live with me when her lease was up. She spent most of her nights at my apartment anyway, so it made sense. Every now and then she would crash at her apartment if she was super exhausted from work or if she had to get up extra early. She told me she did that just so she wouldn't disturb me when she got up and did her whole makeup routine to get ready. As much as I wished she was at my apartment, I didn't really mind that much since she was only a few blocks away. What I didn't know at the time was that she was using her old room as a place to film for her OnlyFans. I didn't even know she had an OnlyFans. She didn't have the best job when I met her. She was making about $16 an hour and she was being worked to the bone. She would constantly be complaining about terrible coworkers, the things she had to do, and how exhausted she was at the end of every day. It took me a little while to notice, but she stopped complaining about all of that. Not only was she not telling me about her workday, she suddenly had all of this money to throw into our wedding. She wanted designer dresses, the nicest venue, premium organic food, you name it. I told her I had no idea how we were going to afford her dream wedding, but she just kept telling me that we would figure it out. I found out about her account by complete coincidence. Realistically, there was probably some algorithm that brought me to this. My girlfriend looked like my dream girl, so most of the pictures I would look at online were of women who looked very similar. I was scrolling through some Twitter comments and I saw one of those ads for an OnlyFans account nested within them. It wasn't from her account, it was from somebody's account that just listed a bunch of different models to get views. I had to do a double take when I scrolled past it to make sure it really was her. I was 100% certain that the woman in the video I saw was my fiancé. Now there's no shame in having these accounts and making money from them. Honestly, if they can hustle doing that, then good for them, but I wished I would have known that my girlfriend had one herself. I'm a pretty traditional guy and I don't love the idea of other men online seeing my girlfriend completely naked doing God only knows what. Of course, I had to click on the account to see what was happening. I paid $14 for a month's subscription so I could see for myself what she was posting. For the most part, it was all stuff she was doing by herself. I recognized right away that it was in her old apartment, so it finally made sense why she was so hesitant to leave. I didn't like that she was doing this, and at the very least I wished she'd told me. I thought maybe we could have a conversation about it and I could convince her to delete it. It wasn't worth throwing away our future. At least I thought that until I saw a collaboration she did with another creator. They were in her room and there was a full video of her having sex with some random man. The more I scrolled, the more content of the two of them that I found. It looked like they had filmed 10 videos together and had taken countless photos. All of her subscribers loved it and were asking for more of them together. I scrolled back further and found another collaboration with a woman that I recognized as her roommate. I was shocked by all of it, but I couldn't look away. I didn't understand why she would open an account without speaking to me about it, and how could she so casually cheat on me on the account. I couldn't stay at home and see her, so I crashed at my buddy's place and talked to him about it. He helped talk me down and figure out what I should do. We both came up with the idea of ruining her account. I still had my subscription, so we commented on a post pretending to be another hot girl and invited a bunch of her subscribers to watch an Instagram live of us. Of course, a bunch of them jumped at the opportunity. When I had enough people, I explained what happened, telling all of those men that she had cheated on me and kept the entire account a secret. A lot of them didn't like that because she was pretending to be this nice sweetheart when she spoke to them. They felt like she was lying to them, so they canceled their subscriptions. My fiancé found out and came to confront me at my friend's house when she saw that I wasn't home. We had a huge argument and she tried to explain to me that she was doing it for us so we could have a nice wedding. I just told her that the wedding was off and explained that she needed to get her things out of my apartment. She tried to convince me not to leave her, but I had no interest in being with her after what I'd seen. We ended up officially breaking up and calling off the wedding. She's continued using her OnlyFans. Apparently the guy she had collaborated with had a girlfriend who didn't know about the videos they made. She dumped him and posted a video explaining what happened, and his account tanked too. I was glad that my video could help her see the truth. OP, I can't believe you had to go through that. Creating an account on something like that is something you should disclose to your partner. From the sound of it, you would have definitely done whatever you could to give your fiancé her dream wedding. It's such a shame she would go behind your back like that. Her hiding the account was bad enough without secretly sleeping with another man for content. They had agreed to film together several times. That goes far beyond a one-time collaboration. The two of them must have had some other kind of connection. I'm glad you were able to break away from her, and I'm glad your story was able to help another person in a similar situation. I wish you well and I hope you can recover from this. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. I, 28 male, just found out that my wife, 29 female, has been cheating on me with our dog walker. We got married young, and have been together for about 8 years. Everything has always seemed perfect from the outside looking in. Our friends would always tell us how much they envied our relationship, and that was something we kind of loved. However, we had our share of troubles, we were just really good at hiding them. Almost nobody in our lives knew this, but we separated a few years ago, and we thought we might divorce. But the old saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder, really proved to be true with us. After we got back together, we were stronger than ever. Both my wife and I wanted children, but due to some health issues my wife has, we knew that a pregnancy for her would be very high risk. Our plan was always to try and adopt a child, once we had the financial ability to do so. At the start of the pandemic, she and I were part of the big puppy boom that happened. Since both of us were home so much, we decided it would be the perfect time to adopt. We adopted a golden retriever pup from a rescue, and it quickly became the central focus of our lives. We thought that since we would both be home with it all the time there wouldn't be any issues, but neither of us was prepared for the energy this dog had. If we didn't let it out to run several times a day, then it would tear our house apart while it was trying to exert some of its excess energy. We ended up hiring a dog walker who would come to the house a few times a day while we were working to take him out on long walks, run with him, take him to the park, etc. The guy we hired was a graduate student at the local university, who was just trying to save up some money while he was in school. When I first met him, I thought that he was a nice kid, he loved the dog, and he was friendly enough with my wife and me. I work in pharmaceutical sales, so a large part of my job requires me to travel and meet face to face with potential clients. When everything started to go into the green, my usual workload resumed and I was traveling again. My wife was still working remotely, so there were a lot of nights that I had to leave her home alone. We had both been huge true crime podcast listeners, so we were a bit paranoid about her being alone. So we had a pretty solid security system installed throughout the entire house. One night I was working late, my team had an overseas conference call, and I hadn't planned on being home until at least 8 p.m. I got a notification on my phone that one of the cameras at my house had been turned off. I stepped away and took a look through all of the cameras on my phone and realized that one of the hall cameras had gone out. It struck me as very odd, and like I said, we were a bit paranoid about crime, so I was worried. I called my wife right away to make sure she was alright, but I didn't get any answer. That only made my paranoia worse. I looked through the other cameras to see if I saw any sign of my wife or an intruder, but I didn't see anything. I called her again and still, there was no answer. After explaining my concerns to my coworkers, everybody agreed that it would be best for me to leave just to make sure everything was alright. God forbid anything happened and I was stuck at work. I drove back to the house as quickly as I could and rushed inside, screaming my wife's name while I went looking for her. My dog ran right up to me, jumping on me like he always does, acting like nothing was happening. That eased some of my worries, but I still needed to get eyes on my wife. I ran up to the bedroom, taking a brief glance at the camera in the hall to see that it was fine. When I turned the knob on our bedroom door, it was locked. I banged on it and called my wife's name, hearing a little bit of scuffling behind the door. I've never been much of a hothead type of guy, but I thought something was happening inside of the room, so I kicked the door in. I walked through the broken door frame and saw my wife completely naked and actively trying to hide our dog walker in the closet. They both froze when they saw me. The camera being shut off suddenly made sense. If she was sneaking him into our bedroom, she didn't want to leave any trail behind for me to potentially see. I was in complete shock when I saw it. My adrenaline was still pumping from thinking that there was some sort of intruder in the house. My wife was trying to say something to me, but I could hardly hear anything she was saying. The only thing that I was focusing on was the man in my closet. I wanted to rip his head off, but I knew that getting physical was only going to hurt me in the end. Without saying anything at all, I walked right out of the house and drove away. My phone was blowing up from my wife as well as some of my coworkers making sure everything was okay. A few days passed and I just tried to think about my next steps moving forward. I was definitely going to be divorcing my wife. There was no chance that I would be staying with her and potentially raising a child with her after what she did. I confessed what happened to one of my coworkers and they helped me to figure out a way to get back at them both. We had actually recommended the dog walker to a lot of people in our neighborhood because we liked him so much when he first started. On top of that, my wife was very involved in the community service circle in our town. That's actually where she found most of her friends. In hindsight, their sleeping together was very clearly premeditated. If my wife had the foresight to turn off the cameras to hide him, then they must have had some kind of chat about it. I looked through our phone bill to try to find any messages between them, and I found a treasure trove of explicit messages they exchanged. With the help of my coworker, we published a small little pamphlet full of the details of their affair, which had apparently been going on for quite some time. This was just the first time they had done it in the house. I went door to door and handed the pamphlets directly to the adults of the houses. I watched their faces for a moment when they realized what it was. It was scandalous news, and I just knew that they would be talking about it for a while. My wife was treated like a leper in the neighborhood after that. All of the friends she made during the time we lived there turned their backs on her, and she was all alone. On top of that, the dog walker was fired from more than half of the jobs he had in our neighborhood. After I turned everyone we knew against her, my wife didn't put up a fight during the divorce. I had enough evidence anyway to keep her away from all of the assets. I got to keep the house, which I turned around and sold shortly after everything was settled. Now I'm ready to move on with my life and forget all about her and hopefully find someone else that I can be happy with moving forward. OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through all of that. I can't help but wonder how much longer it might have persisted had she not altered the cameras in your security system. From the sounds of it, their affair started when you began traveling for work more often. It's such a shame that she would take advantage of that time by betraying you. It's good that your friends and neighbors realized that she had wronged you and cut her off too, and it's even better that the dog walker lost so many of his clients. I wish you the best of luck moving forward, and I hope you can find someone else who makes you happy. Now let's move on to our next story. I, 33 male, have been with my wife, 30 female, for a little over 5 years now. She and I have a pretty standard marriage. There's nothing really to know about it. We have one child together, we both work, and we take a vacation once a year as a family. It's just your average middle-class suburban lifestyle. I've always known that my wife has wanted to be a writer, so last year we discussed our options and we figured out a way for her to try and pursue those dreams. She had a wonderful idea for a novel, and we decided to bite the bullet and struggle for a few months while she buckled down and wrote it. The writing went well, and eventually she had her first full draft. After countless revisions on her end, she ended up looking for an agent to try and represent her so she could publish it. Somehow that was more difficult than writing the actual novel. We found some recommendations from Reddit about how a lot of conventions have time dedicated to pitching agents. We found a convention nearby and bought her a ticket. We couldn't both afford to go, so I stayed home with our son while she made some connections in the industry and sent out her manuscript. She came back the following Monday, and we didn't know for sure if she had any solid offers or not. After a few days, we got a call from an agent who wanted to represent her. We were over the moon. This particular agent had represented a lot of big-name authors and even had some bestsellers under their belt. I was extremely proud of my wife. She had put so much work into her novel, and it seemed like the risk that we'd taken with her quitting her full-time job was about to pay off. The agent lived in New York City and represented several authors in the Mid-Atlantic area. We didn't live too far from there, so it wasn't out of the picture for my wife to travel into the city to meet with him. They both set a standing date for every other Friday to meet at his office in the city so they could discuss potential publishers, editing, film and television rights, etc. I was under the impression that the agent would have wanted what was best for her, since they would be getting a cut of whatever deal the publishers made for her manuscript. What I didn't know was that he only agreed to represent her because he wanted to sleep with her. I wasn't worried for the first month of their relationship, but when their meetings became more frequent and my wife was going to New York once a week or more, I started to get suspicious. I would ask her if they were making any progress, and she would tell me that they were working on it but couldn't give many details. She told me that she was scheduled to meet with publishers but wouldn't give any specifics. Before that, everything she told me would be full of details. I couldn't shake the feeling something was up. When I asked her if there was something going on, she got angry. She made it seem like I was crazy and jealous for even thinking she could have been up to something. One weekend, she was scheduled to go to the city to see her agent again. She told me that she had a couple of important meetings with publishers lined up, so she would be staying in a hotel overnight. My gut was telling me it was a lie, so I decided to follow her. I know it sounds kind of crazy, but I felt like she was lying and I just needed to clear a few things up. I dropped our son off with my mom for the weekend and followed her to New York. I started to think that maybe I was overreacting, but I waited anyway. About an hour of waiting passed and she walked out with her agent. They were laughing and he had his hand on her back. That was a bad enough sign for me to continue watching them. They went to his car, leaving hers behind in the garage. I continued following them to see if anything else happened. First, they went to a nice restaurant together and ate outdoors, sharing a bottle of wine and holding each other's hands. I made sure to take some photos for evidence if needed in the future. Toward the end of what I realized was their date, her agent leaned over and kissed her. I was angry and hurt, but I needed to see what was going to happen with my own eyes. I followed them back to his townhouse, where I was no longer able to see them, but by the music I could hear playing, I could only assume they were sleeping together. I drove back home, taking advantage of my son not being there to go into my wife's office without any witnesses. I tried to log into her computer, but the password I thought she would use didn't work. I realized then that she had something to hide on that computer. In any other circumstance, my wife's forgetfulness would have annoyed me, but I was able to find the username and password written down on a note. When I logged in, I found dozens of saved pictures and videos of her agent. In some of the conversations they had, it was clear he was role-playing some kind of weird power dynamic thing between them. Honestly, by the looks of it, he agreed to represent her entirely because of her looks. Before I left her office, I printed some of their chats and started planning how to expose them both. I figured if the agency that he worked for knew that he had done something so unethical, they would drop him, so I reached out to them to see. It had taken several days for me to hear anything back from the senior partner of the agency. By the time they called me to listen to what I had to say, my wife was already back home and planning her next trip to the city. I told them everything, emailed the chats, and explained how the agent hadn't actually done anything to help with the novel. The partner told me that what he did was a breach of the agency's ethics, and they would be dealing with him. I asked about what would happen with my wife's representation, and they told me that they would have another agent evaluate her work and see if was a place for her. A few days passed and I'm sitting in the living room watching cartoons with my son and my wife came running out of her office in tears. She said that the agency had dropped her because her agent was fired and no other agents wanted to take on her work. I sent my son to his room and told her to sit down, then I explained what I did and how I was planning on divorcing her. She tried to deny it and tell me I was crazy, but I showed her the evidence. Everything was in my name, so I told her she had a week to find somewhere else to stay before I put the house up on the market, and that I would be at my mother's house with our son while she was getting everything sorted out. I grabbed my son and walked away from her, knowing that it was probably the worst day of her life and she had no one to turn to. "OP, I'm so sorry you had to go through something like this. You made sacrifices for your wife to follow her dreams, and she repaid them by betraying you." The agent's intentions seemed very clear. They never actually planned on helping her publish her book. Your wife definitely tried to gaslight you into believing their relationship was professional when it was not. You did a good job by following your gut and looking into their relationship further. It's clear that she had no intention to come clean and tell you, she even tried to hide it from you. From what you described, it sounds like you handled telling the senior partner of the agency with maturity. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact me. The wife, who seemed devoted and loving, was hiding a secret about her lover that ruined their world. She cheated on her husband, fulfilling her lover's every wish. But what happens when the deception is exposed and she is left alone, lost in her own lying games? This is a story of betrayal and consequences. James fell in love with his future wife as soon as he got a new job. He was 25 and Emily was 20. She was working part-time while studying at university. The girl didn't take her colleagues seriously. For a long time she refused him even an ordinary date. But later she gave up and did not regret it. James turned out to be a wonderful man with whom there was something to talk about. In addition, he was handsome and attracted the attention of the female colleagues. A year later, Emily found out she was pregnant and later they had a beautiful baby girl whom her father adored. Neither of them noticed how 18 years flew by. Ever since Emily was a little girl they had a friend, Vika, who had been friends since kindergarten. And they managed to carry this friendship through the years into adulthood. Vika had been divorced for a long time. She was raising her son Callie on her own. He had just recently returned from the army and decided to make up for lost time by attending university. James was used to his wife going out with a friend several times a week. Then they went to the gym together. Then to the movies. then just sat at home and drank. When their relationship just started, still young James did not understand why his beloved did not devote all her free time to him. He resented Emily, quietly hated Vika. But over the years he got used to their relationship. Emily joked with her husband, saying that he was just jealous that he had never had such friends and never would. James understood that, to some extent, this was true. Their daughter had left to study in another city right after high school. She had always dreamed of getting out of her small town. And when the opportunity presented itself, she fulfilled that dream. As her daughter grew older, Emily had more time for herself. She always looked good and James contributed to that in every way. He did not spare any money on his beloved. When the child became an adult, Emily started going to the gym for dancing and doing yoga. She visited beauty salons and spas more often than any other woman in her circle. The investment paid off handsomely. For her 40 years, Emily looked very attractive. It was this attractiveness that attracted the attention of Callie, Vicky's son. Emily came to visit them from work earlier than her friend and was greeted by a young man. They were drinking tea and suddenly Callie said, "You are very beautiful," a woman confused. It is one thing to hear such a thing from a husband or from men her own age. But another from a young man who knows a lot about youth and beauty. Emily was very pleased. "Thank you," she replied with a smile. "I remember when I was 14 years old, I like you very much. My first conscious love, you might say," the young man suddenly confessed. Goosebumps ran down Emily's back. Callie's confession made her feel uncomfortable. She felt as if she had become an unwitting witness to someone else's secret. She did not speak with him again. And she could not look him in the eye if she saw him again. She was embarrassed to admit even to herself that after that night, she constantly thought about Callie. She literally dreamed of the guy taking her with his strong hands and pressing his lips to hers. She went to see her friend less often. Emily began choosing times when Callie wasn't home. She was glad her friend didn't suspect anything, because she didn't want conflict with her. One day she did run into the young man and he, after getting a moment when her mother had retired to the balcony for a smoke, asked Emily directly if everything was all right. "Are you avoiding me?" said Callie. They were standing so close that it took the woman's breath away. "No, you seem to think I just have a lot of work to do. I can't come to you so often anymore," she answered confusedly. Her lips stretched in an attempt to smile. Callie looked at her sternly with a kind of concern. It was obvious that the guy was nervous. The next moment made everything turn over in Emily's soul. There were butterflies in her stomach and her cheeks lit up with fire. Her friend's son kissed her, and she couldn't push him away. A week later, Callie called Emily and offered to come to him. His mother was out of town, and he was home alone. Upon hearing this suggestion, the woman became angry, yelled at him, and hung up. For a long time she sat there, clutching the phone in her hands and breathing heavily. Did he really think she was going to drop everything and run to his bed? That day Emily got off work early and an hour later was standing in front of Callie, who opened the door for her with a pleased look. Their meetings became a regular occurrence. Emily had a whole spectrum of feelings. She was worried about her relationship with her friend, which would definitely fall apart if she found out about it with Callie. She was ashamed of James, who naively thought she was being held up at work, when in fact she was basking in the strong arms of a young man, and she was searingly and passionately in love with her lover. Often they didn't get to see each other, and Emily tried to keep their dates in the afternoon on her lunch hour, so that James didn't suspect a thing. His wife tried her best to act as if nothing was going on. James, on the other hand, began to see that his wife was starting to look even better. Her eyes glittered and her manners changed. He admired Emily without knowing what these changes were connected with. Once lying in bed after another intimacy, Callie told his beloved, "Divorce your husband. Let's go somewhere together. I want to be with you." He was admiring Emily, and she saw it. "Well, yes, and your mother will kill us." The woman laughed, "And we won't tell her." After dialogues like that, Emily always wanted to break up with Callie, never to see him again or remember what happened between them. She and James had been together for almost 20 years, and she couldn't imagine life without her husband. Despite her feelings for her husband's lover, Emily loved him too and couldn't give him up. But their secret union could not exist happily ever after. Once again, when Emily ran away from work to fall into the arms of her lover, Vika caught them in bed. From what she saw, the woman felt ill, and her son had to hurriedly call his mother an ambulance. Shocked, Vika kept repeating the same thing. How could you do this? She looked at her friend with sad eyes, while Emily cried and begged for forgiveness. Callie sat silently in the kitchen, trying not to show his face to the women. He heard his mother say that Emily had to tell James everything, or she would. And the mistress cried and begged her not to. The cheater had to confess. She did not want James to hear about it from a third party, and pulling together the strength, told him everything. He at first didn't believe it, thinking his wife was playing a practical joke on him, but when he saw the tears in her eyes, he understood everything. They decided to save their marriage, they are family, they have a daughter. But after a difficult year full of scandals and resentments, they divorced. Emily's soul missed her beloved, and James could not even bring himself to go to the same bed with his wife. The daughter accepted their divorce. But the relationship between her mother and her peer was not. The woman was left hoping that after a while the girl would change her mind and resume communication with her mother. Callie transferred to a university in another city, and she and Emily moved away from their acquaintances and angry tongues. In the shadow of forbidden passions and hidden desires, fate gently wove her formidable net, drawing her into the arms of a dark conspiracy. The wife, surrounded by glittering illusions of her perfect marriage, suddenly plunged into a dangerous game of fate and began to cheat on her husband. But what happens when the curtain rises and the illusions dissipate, leaving her alone, broken and betrayed? In the following stunning tale of betrayal and experience, she will find the strength to rise up, pick up the pieces of her shattered life, and be reborn in all her greatness. Life in the quiet little village is always monotonous. There are no bright impressions, everything seems to go on as if on a rolling basis. The villagers got used to each other a long time ago and have been pairing off since school. There is not much of a choice. They get married, have children, spend their old age, and then marry their children again, and everything goes in a circle. There is no news either, unless someone arranges it for himself. And the main event in my remote village was the sensational news that they will build a new factory. There was a lot of gossip talk. Few people believed in construction, but one summer evening trucks with building materials rumbled past. Machinery rumbled and a construction crew came. It was that day that changed my life forever. We were used to living in the middle of nowhere, in silence and complete peace. My wife, with her emotional and hot-tempered nature, had reconciled herself to the fact that no bright impressions were forthcoming. I did everything a husband should do, earn money, and help in the household. In the village I am a reliable, strong, and hard-working man. She, like a cheerful dragonfly, was not very fond of work. But dreaming was hers. Dreamed of a city, of impressions, travel, and that I was ideal. Even at the beginning of our married life, Annie tried to diversify our life. She was having fun. But I was tired at work and could not reciprocate the mutual merriment. I was afraid to go into the city, in order not to get involved in some interesting story, and also in order to save the family budget. So our family evenings were peaceful and quiet. However, on a quiet summer evening was the beginning of construction, where I saw him. It was the construction foreman who won her heart. I worked from morning till night, was tired, and didn't notice how my spouse was distancing herself. Without realizing it herself, I started going out into the yard more often to do garden work. But that was just the reason. The construction crew, whose foreman was Nikita, was clearly visible from behind a low fence. In the daytime, I would put on a cheeky sundress and go out to the yard to sunbathe and look at Nikita. He couldn't help but notice it. The girl's passion could no longer sit inside. She needed to attract his attention. So she put on short shorts. A top made a mischievous ponytail on her head, took a hose, and began to water the flowers. The effect was not long in coming. Nikita immediately walked over to the fence and a conversation ensued. Does the construction noise bother you? No, not at all. My wife became embarrassed. I do not pay attention to him. Very sweet and even coquettishly smiled and made it clear that she was interested in him. It was from that day that something broke in my wife. Deep sighs of regret burst from her chest. I did not understand what was wrong with her. When I asked her questions, she would answer that everything was fine. When I came home from work, I would automatically receive a kiss on the cheek and go to dinner. She understood that she was attracted to Nikita, and she could not overcome this desire. A few days later, Nikita asked I to show her where the stores were. She offered to go with him by car. But of course, she was very afraid of the trip. She understood that it was only a pretext, because she saw in Nikita's eyes the same fire of passion that had ignited in herself. But I went. When she first drove outside the village, the foreman turned off the car, pulling into the shade of the trees. And there she was, already feeling his hot breath on her neck. And so shy, I became bold and passionate, falling into Nikita's arms. And so the 2 summer months passed. When I left for work, my wife would meet Nikita's gaze. And later, they would drive together to the woods, where they would give themselves over to love. She couldn't think about anything else. And I began to notice her coldness and aloofness. Already lying in the arms of this foreman, I wondered what to do about it now. How to tell me the truth? Nikita promised to take her to town. He described in every color how they would live together and get married. The summer flew by. Construction was coming to an end, and I was making plans to move to the city. She wanted to go somewhere where emotion and fun beckoned to her. And with Nikita by her side, it would be unspeakable happiness. The construction was finished, and it was time for the young slave to return to the city. I was waiting for a chance to confess to me, but Nikita stopped her. Sweetheart, I can't take you with me right away. I have some things to take care of, but I'll come and get you. But how can I be here without you? We'll keep in touch, and I'll be back very soon, and we'll leave together. And he left, and I stopped sleeping at night. She didn't want to eat anything, didn't want to see anyone, and I saw that and felt that I simply disgusted her. A week went by, but Nikita still didn't call. And then I began to notice that my wife was throwing up in the morning. And soon I saw a test in a garbage bag with 2 lines on it. I did not want to believe it, but I constantly cried and did not eat anything. Immediately, I decided to find out once and for all. And my wife confessed, told me in all the colors of his adultery, and even began to point out my shortcomings. I was furious and slapped in the face. It became clear that the child is not mine, but still did not want to believe in betrayal. But I was possessed by rage. I grabbed my wife and threw her out into the courtyard, threw a few things into her suitcase, followed her, and closed the door. The grief-stricken girl walked down the street, and the fellow villagers looked after her. Many guessed about the young lady's violent shenanigans, but no one offered to help. Waiting for the bus, I went into town. She did not know Nikita's address, but she knew the name of a construction firm. She arrived in the city late at night and had to spend the night at the train station. In the morning, I went in search of her beloved. She found the firm fairly quickly. Nikita was there. He was surprised to see her, took her outside and led her away from the building. He was very angry. Why did you come here? I came to see you. You promised that we would. I'm married. I have a family and a life of my own. With you, I was only having fun. But we're having a baby. I don't want it. Get an abortion, or tell your husband it's his baby. He kicked me out. He knows everything. I don't want to know anything. Bye. If you interfere in my family or seek a meeting, I'll go to the police. Nikita left, and I sat down on the bench and sobbed. She still had no idea what to do. She didn't know anyone in town, and no one wanted her, and in the village life had come to a standstill. Money was enough for a communal room. The next day, the girl went in search of a job. She found a job at a hairdresser's as a cleaner. She worked during the day, but at night, she wept on her pillow and thought of her bitter fate. Anything always wanted to get out into the city, but not under these circumstances, and not at this price. I received a letter from my ex-wife in which she told me everything, apologized, and asked me not to file for divorce. But my decision was unchanged. After the divorce, she never contacted me again. And how is her life now? I do not know. Yes, and